But first tonight, though, the gloves, they're off again. The United States has delivered a new blow to the trade war with China by increasing tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. The hike kicked in just after midnight in the U.S. Now, that's about noon in China. So it means duties on more than 5,700 Chinese goods have increased from 10% to now 25%. And the affected products range from vegetables to telecommunication equipment. China has vowed to retaliate, with the Commerce Ministry saying that it will have to take necessary countermeasures. Beijing has yet to elaborate, with the Foreign Ministry spokesman telling the world to stay tuned for the details. And U.S. President Donald Trump, now, he's keeping it cool. Within the past hour, he tweeted that he was in absolutely no rush to finalize a trade deal with China. And he also said that the U.S. will continue to negotiate with China in the hopes that they do not again try to redo the trade deal. Well, China markets held steady today, and it could be due to the so-called grace period. Now, this means that the 25% levy won't apply to U.S.-bound cargoes that left China before 12:01 a.m. on Friday. Instead, the goods are subjected to the original 10% duty and are only applied upon arrival in the U.S. So that gives an unofficial window about 3 weeks before the tariff actually takes effect, which means it's more crucial than ever for U.S. and Chinese trade officials to hammer out a deal in order to avert a full-blown trade war. Chinese Vice Premier Liu He will kick off a second day of talks with his U.S. counterparts in Washington today, and he's hopeful of reaching a compromise. So for more, let's join Olivia Seong, and she's in Beijing right now. Olivia, do we have any response to, any response from China that is to these increase in the tariffs?
Well, shortly after these new tariff rates kicked in, China's Commerce Ministry issued a very short statement. It said it deeply regretted the U.S. actions and that it would have no choice but to take necessary countermeasures. At the same time, it did say, though, that it hoped to be able to resolve any problems with the United States through dialogue. But we have no further details other than what was in that statement, and Chinese officials have not been providing much information on how exactly China is planning to fight back. But today at the Foreign Ministry briefing, China also said that it had no information on this phone call that President Trump was hoping to have with his Chinese counterpart, President Xi Jinping. The Foreign Ministry said it had no information on that, even though both leaders have, kept in contact through various forms. All China has said so far with regard to China-U.S. relations is that it hopes that the U.S. would be able to meet it halfway.
关于中美关系，我要说的是，一个健康稳定发展的中美关系，符合两国的利益，也是国际社会的普遍的期待。我们希望美方能够同中方一道共同努力，共同来构建以协调合作、稳定为基调的中美关系。在此方面，双方需要相向而行。
Olivia, what kind of retaliation are we expecting from China?
Well, China does have a few options. It can continue to do what it has done in the past, which is to, impose counter tariffs on U.S. goods. So far, it has imposed duties on about $110 billion worth of U.S. goods at varying tariff rates. But the question is how far China can go with this tactic without hurting itself. Also, analysts have pointed out that, China does not import as much from the U.S. compared to how much the U.S. imports from China. So China would not be able to match the scale of those tariffs that the U.S. is imposing on Chinese goods. So now we're also talking about non-tariff countermeasures, and some analysts do think that China could look into imposing non-tariff barriers, such as delaying regulatory approval for U.S. companies as one of the options. Another thing that China could do is to devalue its currency in order to cushion the impact of some of these new tariffs that it has to that it's facing. But although China has said in the past that it would not resort to this measure. But what China really is hoping to do is to keep negotiations going on. And in Chinese state media, it has portrayed China as being in control of the situation. But there are very sticky, difficult issues that both sides will have to address. The U.S. is accusing China of retreating on some of the promises that it has made and some of the things that had been in the draft agreement, particularly in reports. It suggests that China doesn't want to, change some of the laws and is backtracking in this area. So we will really have to wait and see, because analysts do say that there is still incentive for both China and the U.S. to strike a deal, because if not, if talks break down, this could be damaging for both countries' economies.
All right, many thanks for that, Olivia Xiong, speaking to us from Beijing. And for more on this, let's join Andrew Leung of Andrew Leung International Consultants. He specializes in providing strategic insight on China and Western enterprises and governments. He joins us from Hong Kong. Firstly, latest round of steep tariffs on China in the midst of talks between the two sides. Is that surprising?
Well, naturally, it's very, very surprising to everybody, except perhaps even President Trump himself didn't want to do this because it came at the very last minute. The report seems to suggest that the China side is trying to water down some of the earlier promises. And then don't forget, this is really the tail end of the very long and hard negotiations. And so a lot of the terms, concessions on both sides and understanding on both sides should have already been agreed. And in fact, only a few days ago, both sides were sounding very, very optimistic that somehow a deal would be signed. But all of a sudden this happened. And according to President Trump's tweet, it is because the China side all of a sudden deleted a lot of the commitments as far as the implementation of legislation in China to enforce some of the terms. So this seems to suggest that there is a sudden rethink, and then this sudden rethink seems to also imply that with the Chinese economy not collapsing, and in fact with a lot of stimulus, and the China's economy is not really in dire straits. So this perhaps gives the Beijing a little bit of confidence that they can play a longer game, hoping that some better deals would be concluded, and also the realization that on Trump's side, obviously the Trump administration wants to have a good deal under his belt in time for the U.S. elections.
Andrew, saying all that, what will the likely global impact of this stalemate actually be, though?
Oh, the impact would be huge, because don't forget, we're talking about the world's two largest economies. And also, China, of course, is the world's largest trading nation. And what is more, China sits at the heart of the global supply and value chain. Even though products are not marked made in China, China's input is inside. And we'll take, for example, a car, even made in Germany, and you have a lot of components, various parts and pieces already made in China, and that applies not only made in Germany but also made in the United States. So again, this is really a kind of atomic bomb to the world's supply and value chain, and no country is escaping unscathed, because the whole world, China, of course, is not only the world's largest trading partner, but there are so many countries have China as the largest trading partner. In over hundreds of countries, and these countries rely on various imports, again, assemblies in the United States or anywhere, and it's going to be hit one way or the other.
Right.
So it's extremely disruptive. And what is more, it would impact on U.S. consumers.
So nobody stands to benefit from this stalemate, but, you know, they are heading into second round of talks, and let's hope that they can find some sort of common ground. Thank you very much, Alex, for speaking to us. Alex Leung, their China specialist, Andrew Leung, international consultant.